everybody, welcome to this section of our Creativity Online Weekend. My name's Linda and I'm also known online as the Scrapbooking Photographer, YouTube, Instagram and Facebook. I'm based in the Waikato and was previously a close to my heart consultant and have switched over to be a Stampin Up demonstrator. Loving their new papers and everything in the catalogue, so I thought this weekend was a great idea to play with some new toys. My brief for my tutorial was to use the Take to the Sky designer papers, but with something off the wall. So I interpreted that as something a little bit different, not a card or a scrapbook layout. And as it happens, I've been enjoying some junk journaling lately and learning all about bookbinding and all sorts of different kinds of things. And during my delving into that area, I've come across traveller's notebooks. So I thought we would use this paper pack to make a traveller's notebook today. Now, historically, traveller's notebooks have been leather bound with a set of pages in the middle that can be taken out and changed for each trip. But what I thought was we could make a traveller's notebook for any reason. It could be a flower journal, it could be a Christmas record, it could be anything. So I know some of you have been working with the flowers and frames papers earlier in the weekend, so I thought I'd show you this notebook that I have made with that set. It has little pockets in it and it has a signature of pages stitched into the middle, which could be used to jot down notes, pop some brochures in, or things that you want to remember, pictures that you like or whatever. And I've included in this little journal some decorations from the Frames and Flowers kit that the recipient might like to include in their decorating as they go through it. So that's what we're going to make today, but we're going with a masculine theme using the Take to the Sky designer papers, and I'm also going to be using the silicone mat with the mini blending brushes and probably the pick tool, some adhesive obviously, and close to my heart colours I've chosen sapphire and pine. I will use some of these stamps and the die cuts from Adventurous Sky. If you're playing along, the other things that you will need will be some photocopy paper will be fine. I use Reeves drawing paper, which is 110 GSM, acid free, just slightly thicker than photocopy paper, but photocopy paper would work fine. And also some thread. Now I'm using the Stampin Up linen thread, which works fine. I've got a waxing tool that I'll put over it, but you don't need to use that. So I think that, and I also have an awl that I will be using. Before I had the awl, I used the Close to My Heart piercing tool, or you could also use a really thick needle, but this is handy to be able to get a grip on. Okay, so most of you know that there are 12 sheets of a DSP in each pack, and in this pack there is 2 each of these ones that we are looking at here. Now, if you're making this journal along with me, you will need a piece of designer paper that the bottom, when turned upside down, still looks okay. So I will be staying away from using things like the mat, because when you turn the bottom up, you end up with New Zealand upside down. So that one won't work. This one I thought could work, but all the planes are going in the same direction and that would have to be on my outside. So I'm staying clear of that one for that reason. This is a nice plain one, so I'm actually going to use that throughout the book as a little bit of a page. That one could work, and that one could work with the clouds on the outside, or clouds on the inside rather, so that you turn it up that way. But I have decided to go with this one, which is beautiful green on the inside and a lovely blue on the outside, which could be for sky if people are flying somewhere, or it could be for cruising if you wanted to use it for a cruise journal. So one thing I forgot to mention I'll be using is the Simply Scored board from Stampin Up. So putting your DSP nice and firmly in the corner, making sure the underside is the right way up if it matters, and then scoring at 1/2 inch on either side, and then the middle is 6 inches, so we're going 1/4 inch to the left and 1/4 inch to the right. Then we're going to turn it over, making sure that we've got the top to the left, and we're scoring 1/2 inch in from the left and again at 9 inches. Now that gives me a 3-inch turn up. If you want a different turn up, then you can change your measurements accordingly. And then turning it over, we're going to fold those pieces in. So when you're doing scoring, the mountains go to valleys and valleys to mountains, which basically just means that when you're scoring, you're making a valley and you fold it the opposite way to make it into a mountain. So the initial thing that I'm doing here is just folding all of those folds in so that we can see the crease lines a little bit easier. And then we have to trim some little bits off around corners. Now it's a good idea to go slightly in on an angle and then out again from these 2 corners at the top, and that way there's not too much bulk to fold in. And then at the top we're going to snip in from either side and fold those top bits down. Turning it over and trimming the tab off from the front side just makes it nice and neat, I think. And then we're going to come up from the bottom so that we end up with an angle going in when we fold it up. So slightly in from the bottom, going up the 3 inches and then angling it into the edge. And then I can use that piece that I've cut off as a mirror on the other side to make sure that they both go the same distance from the side. And then in the middle, for the middle spine, we'll just go in gradually from each corner as well, up to the top, and then folding those 2 3-inch tabs up, we can then turn it over the way we did at the top and trim that tab off. And then we can start sticking it together. Now I've found, as was suggested to me by who I saw make these initially, that folding that outside in over the top of the pockets makes for a stronger pocket. So I'll start by sticking down the top 2 flaps, and the Stampin' Up tape runner, Stampin' Seal, is great for this because it's one long continuous line. So then we can stick up the pockets from the bottom and then fold in the tabs from either side. So not putting anything along the bottom means that we've got probably about 3 inches spare in the middle that we can tuck things into at the end. So there we've got the outside cover complete, ready to go. So the next thing we're going to do is pick our papers to go inside. Now when you make a signature, which is what you call the fold of leaves that go into a book, probably use about 6, and I'm just showing you there the difference between the A4 copy paper and the Reeves drawing paper. It's pretty similar, but if you're using photocopy paper, you might need to change your measurements just slightly, although I think it would still fit. It would just be closer to the edge at the top and the bottom. So we're not cutting off the sides at this stage, we're folding each piece in the middle. What we can do is measure extra pages on height-wise, fold them in the middle, and then decide what we want. Now the reason I'm not cutting them on the sides straight away is because as you stack them in the middle, the file gets thicker, of course, so they're not all actually the same length on the side to meet up on the side. So I've chosen a few papers from the Take to the Skies designer pack, and I'm just weaving them throughout so that when we get a signature and we look through, we've got some figured pages next to some white pages, and sometimes we've got some double white pages. So what I'm going to do now is just make sure these are all the same height, and it looks like the DSP is slightly taller. So I'll just whip away and trim that, which I've done there. And then putting it back in the outside, you can see that it's too wide. So rather than trim them and have it almost perfect, we're going to use a ruler and just tear them. And I can hold the ruler at the distance I want everything and just tear each leaf off against the ruler. Now it gives a slightly rustic look, which I quite like. If you want to trim it, then you can trim it on your paper trimmer, no problem at all. But that gives me a nice rough edge and they fit in there beautifully. So the next thing I'm going to do is just pretty up those edges a little bit. So I've chosen Pine and Sapphire from close to my heart range of inks, and using the mini blending brush on the silicone mat, I can just go along the edges of those torn bits and give them a little bit of colour. Remembering to do the front side and the back side, because you'll have two edges at the front of the signature and two also at the back. Now the other thing you need to be careful of when you use the silicone mat is that you don't put your paper on top of something that's already been inked. So you can see here I'm not doing everything, I'm leaving some pages plain, and then some I'm doing with the Pine and some I'll do with the Sapphire. So this page that's going in the middle I'll do with the Sapphire ink, and I think I do actually make a bit of an error here and get some ink in the way. And yes, you can see when I move my hand that there's a little bit of blue ink on the page, which I'm not happy about. So that's a reminder to clean the mat, which cleans up really easily with just your chamois. And then I can try again and get that blue edge done. So now we're all sorted. I can put the whole signature together and then it will go in the book like that. So the next thing we need to do is any stamping that we want to do on these pages. And I thought it would be quite nice just to do a couple of little planes here and there and whatnot throughout, just to bring in a little bit more of the Take to the Skies and Adventurous Skies range. So I've used the cloud stamps here and the little plane that's coming in from the right. So that way it's going to be looking as if it's flying into the page rather than out. And I've put a little bit of Sapphire behind with the blending brush just to make it look a bit more cloud-like. And then as I go through the book, I want to put a biggest plane on this one, which I'll put on the left-hand side flying into the page. So I'm using the spongy piece that came with the glass mat to do this stamping, because as we all know, it's good to have some spongy surface underneath the paper when we stamp. So I've popped that on there, and then going through the book again, we've got 1, 2, we might leave that page, and then because the notebook, the idea is to use the white pages to write on or record things or stick your own things in. So I've got the little card that's been cut out of some of the DSP, and I'll stick that on there because it breaks up that plaid pattern a little bit. And then I'll add a couple of tags as well. So to add the tags, I'm just going to make the hole with this little hole trimmer thing that I got from Spotlight. And then I'll just pop them together with a little bit of string or the linen thread from Stampin' Up, and I'll just put the same thread through both holes so that they're joined together, and then I'm actually going to stick them down with the tape runner so that they don't move. So that just breaks up the plaid pattern of that paper and gives people an idea of what they might do. Now be careful not to use the tape runner to stick the string down, the thread down, because it will, when you close the book, it will stick to the other page. So again, on this page, I'll have a little play, but again, I don't want those extra bits on the white side because that's where I've designed it for people to write. So I'll just put a couple of things on the left-hand side. And that page of cut-ups is really handy for all sorts of these different decorating things. So it's a really good pack for using for this journal idea. So then I'll keep going through the book and see if there's anywhere else we can pop things. The middle will have stitching down the bottom, but I do decide to use a couple of the stamps, one in each corner, one on the bottom left and one on the top right, just to break up the white a little bit without encroaching on the space too much. So these are kind of that industrial looking stamp that I'm putting in here. Of course, you could put as many or as little stamps and decorations in here as you like. I'm just going through the book and putting a few here and there to give you an idea of what you can do, and also showing that if you do want to add stamps, it's a lot easier to do it before you sew the signature into the journal. So I've got one more here that I'll do just with that industrial looking stamp, because it doesn't take up a lot of room and it's also quite generic, so it wouldn't matter if the journal was being used for planes or boats, it would work fine. So now we've done all the stamping we're going to do, we can just flip through the signature and make sure we're happy with all the pages and where they're fitting. And it's not quite the way I had it at the start, so I'll just have a little fiddle and get things back in the order that I wanted them. And then our next job is to sew everything together. So a final check in the cover to make sure everything fits and looks right, which it does. So then working with just the signature, we need to make sure that the pages stay nice and tight together while we do the next stage. So I've got these enormous paper clips that go on each side, and you'll see that I keep pushing the middle into the middle to make sure it's nice and firm. And then taking one of the offcuts, this is a piece that we ripped off the edge, so we know it's the right length or the right height, it's the same height as the page. Folding it in half, we can then easily find the middle, and then measuring it, it's 20.5 centimetres. Now if I had an inch ruler, it would be consistent with what we've done, but this is a centimetre ruler. So what I've done is found halfway and then gone 4 centimetres twice from halfway. So we end up with 5 spots down the centre line of this piece of scrap paper. So putting that into the middle of the book, you can then see where the holes are going to go. Then taking your awl or your piercing tool or whatever it is you're using, you can push it through where the dots are on the guide, right through all of those pages. So this is why it's really important that the paper clips hold everything in place, because you don't want the papers to move, you want them all to line up nicely for when you stitch them in. Now I did do one with only 3 holes and it wasn't nearly as stable. So now we can put the same piece of paper into the middle of the outside cover and putting it on top of the mat so that we can pierce through those holes in the spots where we want the holes on the spine. So then the fun bit comes with a piece of linen thread that I'm going to make a little bit more than twice the length of the journal, and running it through a big piece of wax just helps the cotton to stick together, because what you don't want to do is split it as you're going through the holes. So this is called pamphlet stitch, where you go through the middle hole of the signature, taking it right through the middle hole of the spine. You leave a tail in the middle so that you've got something to pull in and out, and then go up one stitch, one section to the next hole and pull it through there, and then come back out from the middle at the top stitch through the top hole in the spine. And then this is the tricky bit, going back through the whole second down, and you want to come out through to the middle of the papers without splitting that cotton, because you need to be able to shuffle it through like I'm doing there to make sure it's a nice secure stitch. And then going straight down to the 4th hole, so the one up from the bottom, and then coming down the back spine into the hole at the bottom to go through, and then back up through that one again and again, making sure that you don't split the cotton on the way through. Sometimes it takes a little bit of fiddling to make sure you get a nice clean stitch through, and practice makes perfect. So bringing it all through, we can take the needle off and then just fiddle with those threads to make sure everything's nice and tight. And you can ping them on the back like you would a guitar string, and they should be fairly firm. If they're not, thread them through like I'm doing here until they are. And then you've got your 2 strands clean in the middle that you can tie together. So I'll just have another little ping up the back to make sure everything's nice and firm. And then tying 1 knot like normal, and then the second time we go around 3 times just to make it really secure. And then we can trim those strings off if we want to, or we can add little bits to it like I did in the other journal, which I'll show you at the end. So the paper clips are off and everything looks neat and tidy. The stitching is up the centre of the spine on the back, and we can just go very quickly through the book to make sure that all the pages open nicely and that they're all nice and secure. And that looks all good. So the next thing we're going to do is make a topper for it, which is what we call the decoration on the front of a journal. So using the Stampin Up mini embossing and die cutting machine, I'm going to use a combination of some plain cardstock, which is Stampin Up, so the same colour all the way through, and I'm also going to use some of the industrial type print from the designer pack, and I'm going to use the take your pick tool to take some little pieces out of here. So I won't show you all the die cutting, but it's interesting to know that quite a few of the different die cuts fit through this little mini machine. So even though you think they might be bigger, you can make them fit quite easily. So you can see here that I use the piercing tool to get the bulk of the die cut out, and then there's all those little bits left in the die cut which I can get out far more easily using the brush tool on this take your pick. So I'll just whiz through and have that fixed onto the front of the journal now, and then we'll get on to making some things to go in these pockets. These are the offcuts from when we trimmed the pages down that we've used through the journal. So I've cut them down to 3 inches wide and then folded them in half. So they're 6 inches by 3 inches when they're folded. And then taking some of the paper that we used for the pages, I've trimmed 2 3/4 inches wide and done the same thing, folded them in half so they fit inside these little designer pieces as a little notepad. And we're going to stitch those together the same way as we did the book, only we'll just use 3 holes. So each one with a hole in the middle and then a hole evenly distanced on either side. So I'm using the awl again and just really doing it by eye against the measurements on the glass mat. So moving the notepad so that the centre hole is the right distance away. And then once again pulling the linen thread through the lump of wax to seal it a little bit, threading the needle, and we're going to do pamphlet stitch again, which comes out from the inside through the middle hole and then back down the one on the right and then into the one on the left and then coming back into the one in the middle so that you've got your 2 strands in the middle where we can tie a knot again. So you end up with one long stitch in the middle, and sometimes I do cross those strands in the middle too, so that with a knot holds that in place. So that will fit there, and then we'll do the other one the same way, and then we'll have 2. And that means we can put one in the front section of the journal, inside the front cover, and it will fit quite nicely there, and then put one in the back as well. And then I'm just going to use the rest of the tags from the cutout sheet and a couple of the cardboard bits just to pop in the pockets to pretty them up a little bit. The cloud one with the plain is a little bit too big, so I've used the smaller green one, and I'm basically just going to use up what's left on that sheet of cutouts. So again, I'm making holes in the top of these tags, and I will tie them individually this time so that they can be used either throughout the book or where they are in the pockets in the front and the back of the journal. Again, with the finishing off, you could use anything you wanted to do in the front and the back pockets, and you could put some mounts for people to use behind photos. You could do any number of things, just like we did with the stamping. So again, this is just to give you a little bit of an idea of the different things you can do there. It does bulk up the front and the back a little bit, which adds a little bit of sturdiness to the journal as well. And when you put things on the pages within the signature of the book, then it will obviously fatten it out as well. So we do have to be mindful of that when we think of quantities. So that is just about finished now, so we'll just have a quick flick through and it all looks good. These strands in the middle need to be shortened. You can add little charms to them or something if you want to, but given it's a masculine book, I'm leaving them like they are. And then flicking through, it's all good. So the next thing we're going to do is take your pick tool and unscrew the brush and put on the pickup tool. So using the industrial trinkets, the pickup tool works a treat at picking these up. It's got a tiny little bit of putty in the end, which makes it so much easier to move the trinkets into place. And with any sequins or gems or anything that's so fiddly to pick up with your fingers, it works really well. So I've used that to put these trinkets in place, and I'll just pop 3 up the top, and I really think that's all it needs. So they are kept in place with the multi-purpose glue. And there we have a his and hers book. Thank you so much for watching, and happy crafting, everyone.